Most people think that they're stuck in life because they lack motivation or discipline or maybe a better plan. But in my experience, that's almost never the real problem. The real problem is much deeper than that. Most people are not actually living as the person that they were created to be, but rather they're living as a learned, diminished version of themselves. And until that changes, no productivity system, habit stack, or motivational podcast is going to fix it. Over the years, I've worked with many people who feel stuck. They feel frustrated, even though they're really capable people, but something on the inside feels blocked, and they know that they could be more, but they can't seem to get there for some reason. And after working with hundreds of people just like this, I started noticing a very consistent pattern. You see, the problem was rarely their intelligence, nor was it their work ethic, and it definitely wasn't the fact that they needed another self-help book or podcast or something of that nature. The real problem was this. They were trying to build a meaningful life from a diminished version of themselves, a learned diminished version of themselves. So let's talk about this idea of the learned, diminished version of oneself. If you can capture this concept, this has got the power to actually set you free into some real growth. Every single person in life goes through experiences that shape them. They go through disappointments and rejection, broken relationships, dysfunctional family systems, trauma, loss, failure, you name it, it's all in there. And probably for most of you watching, I just checked off 4 or 5 of the things that are in your history. But here's the deal, when these things happen in our formative years, we don't yet have the maturity to process them properly. And so what do? We react. We adapt in the best way we know how. We learn coping strategies. Some people learn how to shrink back. Some people learn how to please everyone and keep the peace. Some people learn how to hide their voice. Others learn how to avoid risk. Some people learn to become hyper-independent. But basically, all of these survival strategies just keep on building this learned, which comes from reacting to our situations, diminished, smaller than it needs to be, version of ourselves. And over time, you slowly create a version of yourself that's actually way smaller and lesser than who you're supposed to be. What happens as a result of this is that most people, and my experience tells me nearly all people in life, actually live from a position that is learned and diminished rather than organic and full. People make career decisions from this place. They build relationships from this place. They make massive, big life choices from a learned and diminished version of themselves, and then they wonder why life never quite feels aligned. The reason is the person that they're trying to build their life upon is not the true person. You know, if you're anything like me, you've probably had that experience where you've been in a big shopping centre somewhere and you're trying to find a specific store that you need to go and buy something from. But because the building's so big, you can't quite find your way around. You go to every level, you walk from end to end, and finally, especially some of us men, we finally give up and we go, I better go and consult the map. And so whether it's digital or it's in print, you go and find the information board to find out where this store is that you're trying to get to. And every single one of these maps in every shopping centre all over the world has the same information on it. It's got a giant big red dot on that map, and next to the big red dot are 3 words. You know what I'm about to say. The 3 words, you are here. And usually a giant big red arrow pointing to the place in the shopping centre where you actually are. Now again, if you're anything like me, you probably have been through that futile process of seeing the dot, seeing the arrow, reading those words, you are here, and then proceeding to argue with the map and the board, trying to tell the board that it's telling lies about how the building was built. Somehow we can't seem to fathom that the place we're trying to get to could be where this map is telling us. But the problem that we're actually having is we haven't yet discovered the truth about where we're starting from. And do you know what? Our lives work in a very similar way. We've all got goals, we've got hopes, we've got aspirations. We've got this path that we're trying to build our lives upon, but we get lost, we get waylaid, we get stuck. We end up in places where we lose connection with our dreams and we can get frustrated and depressed and feel like we want to escape our own lives. But sometimes the problem is really, really simple. It's the fact that we've been trying to chart our course from the wrong starting point. We've been trying to live our lives as a learned, diminished version of ourselves. The truth of the matter is, until we actually face up to this cold, hard reality of the big red dot, we are never going to experience the life that we're hoping for. The big red dot tells us the truth. It says to us, you are here. Whether it feels good, whether we enjoy it or not, this is the truth that we need to hear, that we have a true starting point. And I like to explain it to people like this, that your growth, your development begins when you actually start to discover what I call the true you. The true you is the version of you that exists underneath all of these coping mechanisms, underneath the survival strategies and the learned limitations. It's the version of you that you were actually designed to live your life from. We've got to understand that personal growth, it's not about inventing a new version of ourselves. It's actually about discovering the true version of ourselves. And that's what this episode is all about today, understanding you've got to stop living from a learned, diminished version of you and come to terms with the words next to that big red dot that say, you are here. If you've got some traumas and some baggage and some disappointments and some frustrations that have gotten in you, they are holding you back. They are keeping you in a certain place. And until you're ready to recognize this truth, you're not starting from the correct location, and so you actually have no hope of getting to your preferred destination. You can only get there if you chart your course from your true starting point. So let's get practical about this. What do you need to do? Step number one is you need to recognize your true starting point. You've got to get honest with yourself. You've got to do the big red dot thing. You've got to talk to yourself in the mirror if you need to and say to yourself, you are here. That false version, that pretend version, that mask you've been putting up at work and in front of your extended family, it might have been helping you to get by for now, but you can't put up with staying stuck any longer. You've got to peel that falsity away, get that mask out the way, and recognize the true you is waiting for you to actually begin from your real starting point. The second thing that we need to do is to specifically, in detail, ask ourselves, what is that red dot in our life? What is the red dot detail? Maybe for you it's fear. Maybe for you it's worry. Maybe for you it's the fact that you haven't yet been able to deal with all of the challenge and the hurt and the trauma in your past and in your formative years. Why am I really stuck here? What patterns keep repeating in my life? What fears keep controlling my decisions? That kind of honesty becomes the starting point for real change that can actually last. And number three is that we have to actually rebuild from that starting location of the true you. Stop trying to build from a false location that's not who you actually are, but go back to the basics, discover the true you, and start to rebuild from there. And once you begin discovering that, something powerful happens. The powerful thing that happens is organic growth by design starts to take shape. Not forced, not manufactured, not something you're trying to fake, but actually something that is organic and natural that you were always created to do. The real issue, friends, is identity. And if you're not living from your true self, but rather a learned, diminished version of yourself, you're never going to get to where you're trying to go in life. Lastly, as we finish this episode, I'm thinking back around a client, a student of mine by the name of Rebecca, who when she first started working with me, she had been through so much of this family dysfunction and trauma and disappointment that she had no real idea who she was. She was starting from all of this guesswork of, I think I'm this person, I think I'm that person, but her self-awareness was actually so low, she didn't have any ability to orient herself towards her starting point. And so as she worked with me, I was able to train her in understanding who she really was, where her real starting point was. She began to become a self-aware person, beginning from her big red dot, and then charting a path forward in life where now, many years later, she's happily married, has children and a family of her own, understands her strengths and her weaknesses, and is thriving with the gifts and the strengths that are actually true to her. The same thing can happen for you if you actually apply the right process. I'd love for you to go through that experience of discovering the true you. In fact, why don't you click on the show notes below? I've got a link there for my training program called the True Self Transformation Program, where I actually work directly with people to help them achieve this exact process, get the real personal growth happening, and end up with the life that they aspire to. I'm glad you took the time to watch today, and I'd love to see you in another video real soon.